do you remember what it felt like to be swung around by the arms as a child? That giddy feeling as your insides are pushed towards your toes. And how about a roller coaster? Up, 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 then whoosh, it falls away and your stomach is left way behind. Well, I had an experience a little bit like that on the Pacific Ocean in 2012, pinned to the bunk in the cabin of my little rowing boat, Gulliver, as Tropical Storm Mawar raged outside. Winds gusting over 70 miles an hour, waves topping out at 15 meters, that's 50 feet. It was chaos outside, and I was terrified. All of a sudden, I'd be thrown down the face of the wave, upside down, capsized, hanging, suspended in my harness, willing Gulliver to come back round. Come on, Gulliver, come on, Gulliver, come on, Gulliver! It was terrifying. People say, I couldn't do what you do, Sarah, I'd be so scared. Heck, I was scared in those days. Questions marched about in my mind. What if Gulliver doesn't come back around? What if we crash into something? What if something crashes into us? Before the storm arrived, I'd written smile on one hand and breathe on the other. I hoped that those two small things might be able to ground me and help get me through. It turns out it's impossible to smile when you're terrified. But that was my goal, to be present, but sort of zoned out as well. Part detachment and part tuned in, a sort of mindfulness, you might say. More than once, I questioned what the heck I was doing out there. Adventure? Learning? Was it worth it? The ultimate risk was death, which could happen in a number of ways according to my logic, and even more according to my imagination, kind of going a bit nuts at this point. By this point, or at this time, I was 15 months into my journey, a bid to loop the planet using human power. I hadn't expected to be home quite so soon. 36 hours into that storm, I concluded that there'd been so much damage put upon my boat Gulliver that it wouldn't be safe and viable for me to carry on. And so back at home, my shore team activated the crisis plan. And 36 hours later, arriving an hour early, the Japan Coast Guard arrived. And they took me off my boat Gulliver and brought me home. And I left Gulliver, my teammate, out at sea. A couple of days later, having returned to shore, I flew home, back to the UK. And to be honest, at first, I didn't really know what to feel or how to feel it. Everybody wanted to know what it had been like out there, what it felt like to be home. Sarah, you must be so happy. Heck yes, I was grateful to be alive and grateful to those people who had risked their life to come and save me. But in truth, very quickly, I just fell apart. I was wired. I'd wake up in the morning after 15 hours lying in bed. I wouldn't call it sleeping necessarily. And I was rigid. I was terrified. I couldn't stop crying once the first tears had actually arrived. My to-do list terrified me. My inbox set me off crying. I was paralyzed. And one day, I found myself in a car park, unsure how I'd got there, with no idea how I would get home. Because the truth is, I was still trapped in that little boat. Now, my way has always been to kind of push on and push forwards, to carry on. And I guess that's what I did with these demons to start with. But it's a bit like trying to ignore a broken leg. It didn't work. And so I realized I needed help. I needed to go back into that storm so that I could diffuse it, so that I could put words and a time frame around what had happened, allow everything to process and decompress. And it really was only in confronting that fear of myself, of my own imagination and what that storm had done to me, that I could set myself free from it. It's ironic, isn't it, that often the scariest things are within. So part of the reason why I'm drawn to adventure is that idea that in setting out, the only thing that we know is that we don't know what's going to happen next. And so it was, in the first leg of my journey in 2011, as I cycled across Europe and Asia, I came across a guy in China named Gao. I met him in a petrol station. He was interested in my bike and excited by my journey. "Where have you come from?" he said. "London." "Wow, that's cool. And where are you going?" "London." "Oh, wow, I'm proud of you," he said. And Gao said that he would like to make a bicycle journey, but he didn't know how. All those doubts and what-ifs and fears about what other people would think, and hey, we can recognize that, they were holding him back. And I said, well, look, it's not rocket science. Just get a bike and go and have a go. It's that first step, committing and saying, "I will," that can take you the furthest towards your goal. We wished each other luck, and I hoped that one day I would hear from Gao. Half an hour down the road, he rocked up in a car. "Sarah, you need a companion. I want to come with you to Beijing on a bicycle. You be the leader, I'll be the guide and the translator," he said. I couldn't believe it, and I was hesitant. But he had it all worked out. "We'll buy food and water, and we'll travel at night when it's colder, Sarah." And something clicked. Of course he should come. What better gift to pass on? And so I said, let's meet in 2 days' time. And Gao said, "Okay, I'll go and buy a bike." How cool is that? So here he is 2 days later. The hair has gone, the bike is there. A huge Chinese flag billows off the back. His brother said to him, "Gao, you need a Chinese flag, but it must be bigger than Sarah's." Mine was about this big. And so off we went, into the Gobi Desert and up through the mountains of China. It was dusty, it was hot, it was thirsty, it was mad, but it was beautiful. And we made it to Beijing together, 2,000 miles, 35 days of cycling. The guy who's never cycled more than a couple of miles before nails it. And I filmed him, and I said, "Gao, what's your advice to people? What's your advice?" And he said, "If you want to do something, just do it. Don't worry about anything, just do it." And perhaps rather cruelly, I said to him, "In 3 words, can you sum up what that feels like to have achieved that goal?" And he said, "I am happiness." Heart melted at that point. And so I think that's a story for all of us. We all have a Gao inside of us, and we all have a Gobi Desert ahead of us. Now back to the Pacific. Even before I set out from Japan, even before I left Gulliver in the Pacific Ocean, I knew that I wanted to return to sea. Just because it had happened once didn't mean that there would be a terrible tropical storm again. I still had half of my journey left to run. And I knew that, just like that line from E. Cummings's poem, for whatever we lose like a you or a me, it's always ourselves that we find in the sea. I knew that there'd be healing out there. And so 9 months of putting myself back together and of buying a new boat and making the systems and the boat and my headspace more robust, I found myself back on the Pacific Ocean in happy socks. Now, I think it was about 3 weeks in when I had my first capsize. And the 3 weeks up to that point were terrifying. And I'm not saying that the capsize itself was pleasant. I still hate being upside down in any sort of boat. But it had sort of diffused things a bit. A reminder that often the scariest things are within. Now, the Pacific Ocean didn't go exactly to plan the second time round. 4 months of headwinds and storms and contrary currents meant that I wasn't even halfway across the ocean. With the onset of winter storms, that meant that I wasn't going to make it across. We needed a new plan. But looking at the vast Pacific Ocean, there's not much going on in the middle there. Not that easy to make another plan. But my team and I looked at our options and decided that the only way was to take a sort of 90-degree change of course, head north by 600 miles to Adak in the Aleutian Islands, part of Alaska. I could land safely, and most importantly to me, I could carry on with my journey the next year, adding in a 1,500-mile kayaking section and another 1,000 miles of biking. Somebody said to me, "Sarah, are you disappointed you didn't make it to Canada like you planned?" And I sort of just smiled. Alaska. How exciting is that word? And I arrived in Alaska a month after that big decision to change course. And I did return the following summer to kayak those 1,500 miles. And just like the other parts of the journey that didn't go quite to plan, that turned out differently from how we'd first imagined they might, it was one of the most magic and rewarding parts of the entire journey. So, back to the Pacific Ocean. Just before Tropical Storm Mauer arrived in 2012, the sea was flat and bright and calm. It was so still that I could hear the wing beat of an albatross as it flapped languidly by. And I found myself stood at the edge of the boat, barefooted like I am today, naked, happily I'm not, goggles, safety line, gripping the edge of the boat, peering in, willing myself to jump and go for a swim. The problem is, I'm scared of deep water. Yeah. I know that if I can just summon up my inner gal, jump and go for it, it's going to be liberating, freeing, and beautiful. But once again, the doubts, the fears, the questions march about in my mind. What if, what if, what if? Eventually, I jumped, and of course, it was absolutely magic. I want you all to remember the gal inside you. Thank you.